After 3 days of shooting with the S1R2, I had zero overheating issues doing long takes in any 8K shooting mode. When you're outdoors, all of the parameters are so uncontrollable.
In today's podcast episode, I'm sitting down with Josh Cameron to talk about a spicy topic in the Lumix world, which is overheating. Love it or hate it, this is something that's been happening to a lot of people across the board with the new S1 cameras. So in today's episode, we're going to be diving into our real world experience actually using these cameras on professional job sites, talking about how to get the best results and just avoiding the issue altogether. So without further ado, Josh Cameron. What's up, brother?
Hello, Matt. How are you?
Good. How are you? I feel like we haven't had a chat in a bit.
No, it has been a while. It has been a while, but you're looking as fresh as ever.
Thank you. I try. We were talking about rituals beforehand, and one of my only rituals that I do before filming that I wasn't able to do is I try to rub out all the hair gel out of my hair to make it look more natural. But we're stuck with a crusty head Matthew today.
Well, there is one way to completely supersede that, which is just don't use hair gel.
That's fair. I have a lot of hair though. But I think just diving into this episode, because I feel like everyone knows who you are, unless you want to give a quick brief intro of like, who are you and what do you do, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Josh, and I am effectively a massive Lumix nerd. I've been making Lumix and L-mount related content exclusively on YouTube now for about 5 years. All things from the nerdy tests to the codec comparisons to the new camera reviews and everything in between.
Now, I kind of want to deep dive into sort of the core issue of today's topic, which is obviously overheating. Now, prior to, I would say, the Lumix S9, no Lumix camera has really ever known to ever overheat. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Why was the Lumix S1 models more specifically, why are they generally overheating in your own opinion?
I mean, of course, I'm not an engineer, so I can't give a conclusive and definitive answer to this one. But, you know, if I had to sort of use, you know, the half brain that I have, I'd say that it's probably down to physics mainly. Essentially, with the new S1 series cameras, they've packed in so many good features into a body that is still effectively the same size as the S5 II series cameras. So inevitably, that's going to heat things up. And, you know, we're also talking about two different sensor types that are way more intensive on processing, a 44 megapixel sensor in the S1R2 and the partially stacked sensor, should I say, the 24 megapixel partially stacked sensor in the S1 II. So both of those sensors are going to be drawing a lot more sort of energy, if you like, a lot more power. They'll need a lot more to, you know, get the benefits of the extra resolution and the extra sort of processing speeds. And then the other thing is the media types. I think that, you know, of course, the S5 II series cameras, they had dual SD card slots, which are basically just little pieces of plastic, you know, whereas CF Express is effectively like taking a super fast SSD and cramming it into a tiny little metal casing, and it acts like a little radiator inside your camera. And you know, I was actually speaking to my friend Ed about this, Ed Prosser, and CF Express was designed for the bigger cinema bodies, right, where the sensor, the processor, the fans, etc., they're not all bundled in together into a small body. And I think that effectively is causing a lot of issues for a lot of people.
And I think that's also something that's worth noting is you can shoot on a lot of the settings with an SD card that does produce a lot of less heat, but you could also do the SSD recording and then, you know, eliminate that internal heat that's happening in there. But I think generally speaking, I think these cameras, everyone wants like all these like bells and whistles. They want all these professional features. People want ProRes RAW. Like, I think when the audience and like people want all these features, they don't want the body that typically comes with a camera that has those features in it. They want something that's small. They want something that's compact. I think it's similar to like phones. Like, I don't know about you, but if you have your phone outside and it's in direct sunlight, it doesn't take long until an overheating warning pops up on your phone. It's the exact same type of thing. This camera has so much that's packed into it, and what it's capable of makes it more likely to overheat. But I kind of do want to deep dive into sort of your experience using these cameras in the real world. Even though we both do YouTube, I know, at least for myself, YouTube is not my full-time job. It does make me money, but not my full-time job. So I'd love to hear kind of your real world experience on different camera models for the S1R Mark II, the S1 II, and then you just got the S1 IIe recently, right?
Yeah, so I just got the S12E and I have ran a few tests on that camera too, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, so in terms of my actual real world experience with the S12 and the S1R2, I've actually not really encountered that many issues. So I know that there was a lot of people saying, oh, it's funny that they released the S1R2 in winter. The event was in the Arctic Circle. Isn't that really, like a coincidence or whatever? But about a month after that event, I flew out to Arizona to shoot a project out there, which was 3 months long. And I only had the S1R2 and the S5 2X with me. I was using the S1R2 mainly for those 3 days. And we were in the Arizona desert. We're in Tucson, Arizona, which I'm sure any of the Americans watching right now will understand how hot it gets there. So it definitely wasn't for the faint of heart. And yeah, after 3 days of shooting with the S1R2, I had 0 overheating issues. On day 2, there was one occasion where maybe 4 hours into the shoot day, I got the warning, but luckily we were breaking for lunch at that point anyway, so the camera had its chance to cool down and chill out. And then, we got back to shooting and everything was totally fine. So, that was probably the most intense heat I've put these cameras against in a real world scenario. And I also want to sort of mention that the sort of work that I'm doing is very, very rarely long form takes. It's been a while since I recorded any long take interviews or events or, panel speeches or anything like that. So realistically, I'm just sort of record, stop all the time. So it doesn't really come into play if you shoot in that way. And that's the case for both the S1R2 and the S1 II. I think the main issue that people are finding is the ones that are recording for longer sessions. So that could be during weddings, for example. That's going to be a massive factor because, of course, a lot of weddings happen outdoors and you're recording speeches that take forever. You're recording ceremonies that maybe are 45 minutes to an hour long. So that definitely might, give the person a little bit of fear in their little soul. So I can totally get it. But yeah, in terms of my experience, I've not really experienced overheating issues in the real world per se, but that's not to say that they're not there, and I don't want to discount the fact that some people have had that.
And I think that's like part of the thing where it's like, before you even get this camera, like if you have a job that's coming up, try to rent out this camera, try to rent out different cameras, test them for yourself, put them through how you personally would want to use this camera and see how the results would kind of work at the end of the day. For my experience, I've only experienced on job sites, paid client work, overheating on the S1R Mark II. And that was before I changed the settings to fast and on high to handle it. But that's like the camera overheated on me, but I was recording 32-bit flow audio. I was in direct sun. I was running HDMI, I was in 6.4K open gate, so a lot of, and with a CF Express Type B card, so a lot of intensive things, and I didn't know about the overheating, and this was the first week of experiencing the camera, and I was just all right, I'll take it on job site. And afterwards, after I changed those settings, consistently, because I do record more longer takes. I've done long form podcasts in a garage before. I've done construction jobs where I'm somewhere out in the sun for 4 hours. A lot of outdoor sport commercials, a lot of testimonial stuff, but a lot of different things where I do put these cameras to record long period of takes. And consistently, the S1R Mark II has only been the one that has given me the symbol before. But then with the S1 II and the S1 IIe, but those two cameras specifically have never given me a warning before, apart from trying to do stress tests in environments where I'm testing the cameras. But for actual professional workflows, I've never gone overheating symbol, and I've never overheated on either the S12 or the S12E for professional client work and recording podcasts. So I'd be kind of interesting now to kind of dive into talking about kind of your testing results, because if you didn't know, Josh has done an entire video with a very well put together spreadsheet that I'll link down below that kind of goes over to some of his test results and getting some of the best results from these cameras. But I would be kind of interesting to hear some of your most impressive results on different camera models, and then the most shocking results on like if it overheated.
Yeah, so I don't have the table to hand in front of me right now, but I sort of remember, the best results kind of, and what sort of codec, frame rate, etc. they were and stuff. We'll go from worst and then work our way to the best. I think it's pretty safe to say that you shouldn't be doing long takes in any 8K shooting mode on the S1R2. Those were definitely the results that yielded the, worst sort of performance, if you like. So I think I was getting around half an hour before power off from overheating, shooting in 8K. On the S1R2, and then on the S12, and again, like you said before, like that camera, if we had to compare those two cameras, the S12 is the one that performs better thermally. I was able to go for over an hour easy on the S12 without any warning symbols, etc., but only when I wasn't using CF Express Type B. And I really want to stress this because I feel like this is going to be probably the biggest sticking point with these cameras at the moment, is those people that are using the dual slots for redundancy. Now, I know that people that are shooting events and weddings and stuff, using both slots is of course extremely important, again, for that redundancy, so that you do have two copies. So I mean, I feel absolutely fine letting it known publicly that I have spoken to Lumix about whether it's possible or not to essentially release an update that allows users to simultaneously record to the SSD and to the SD card. And I know that some people out there will be scratching their heads going, well, it can do that already. And it can, but only with proxies to the SD card. And what I'm getting at is doing the full meat file to both the SSD and the SD card, because then that way we have two media types that are not prone to overheating as much as CF Express, and then that way if anyone does need to do those longer takes, they know that they're not using a media type that's more susceptible to overheating.
And I was actually going to ask, because I was going to look at it today in my studio, but you answered my question for me, is if that was possible, because I just don't dual record typically, because I'm just back up my footage the moment I get home from a shoot, and I've not as important for redundancy purposes. But do you know on the top of your head, have you stress test these? Because I know you did in a controlled environment with like 72 degrees, which I believe is like 22 Celsius or so. Was it 22 Celsius that you did most of your recordings in?
So all of the tests, all of the tests were done between 26 and 29 degrees Celsius.
Okay, even warmer.
Yeah, so basically, the UK has been in a heat wave now for quite some time, and I thought it was quite a good opportunity to actually test some overheating, because historically here it doesn't get hot enough for anything to overheat.
I've heard there's a heat wave. It's called summer.
Yeah, exactly. And we're finally experiencing it here. So yeah, I mean, I did some Googling. I found out what the sort of average room temperature was worldwide, because of course I know that it's going to vary from place to place. But according to Google, most countries set their room temperature to around 22 degrees Celsius. So it was still about 5 to 7 or 8 degrees over the usual room temperature, if you like. When I first made this table and was doing all of these overheating tests, I was super concerned that people were going to look at the tests and think that it was a little bit silly because it wasn't done outdoors. And something that I was trying to stress at the start of the video that I made about my testing was that when you're outdoors, all of the parameters are so uncontrollable, i.e. cloud cover, wind, whether you're in direct sunlight, the time of day, all of this sort of stuff will have a massive impact on how much recording time runtime you can realistically get out of these cameras. So in order for me to create a benchmark, it made sense for me to control every condition that I could, right? So that at least we know there's no variable that's really affecting the result.
I think there's one test result that I want to shine that's like in my original overview for the S1 II was with that camera, when I set it to auto 1, which is it proactively tries to cool your camera instead of reactively like auto 2, and then the thermal management I set to high, my settings were 6K open gate, 24 frames a second. I was running HDMI and then 32-bit flow audio with an SD card and an internal battery in a 90-degree Fahrenheit for us US people, and then 33 Celsius, but again, in a studio, so no sunlight, no wind, no whatsoever, so it was purely just a hot studio. The camera ended up dying on me with no overheating warning whatsoever. And I think one thing that tells me is like, it might not be a temperature thing as much as it is a UV issue, like how the sun is affecting the camera via the UV. Same exact settings and everything, but I wasn't running HDMI and I wasn't running 32-bit flow, but with an SD card and internal battery. I was just in direct sun at 24 C or 75 Fahrenheit, and the camera overheated me in 15 minutes. So I think that alone right there tells me it might not be a temperature thing, because the temperature was way cooler. It was just in direct sun with the sun UV rays baking on the camera. And I think that's like the main difference. Is like this camera can handle temperatures, it just can't handle the UV rays, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, it's very natural to come to that conclusion, right? So I mean, I can't really comment too much, because I don't really, I haven't probably not done as many sort of tests outdoors as maybe you have. So, I mean, I've done a few shoots outdoors, of course, with these two cameras. And like I said earlier, I've not had any issues. But I mean, if it seems like your sort of roadmap before overheating is way shorter, when you're outdoors compared to indoors, then there must be something about the outdoor environment that's affecting it. And of course, we don't have the good old ovs when we're indoors, so maybe that is it. I don't know. One thing I do want to tack on to what I was saying earlier, though, about sort of just generally long takes and all that sort of stuff, and also something that I didn't really stress too much in my original video about overheating, is that personally, if I was recording a take for over an hour and a half, whatever, I'm probably not going to need any resolution or frame rate higher than 4K 25p or 24p for you guys in America. So when there were people saying, oh, have you tested doing 6.4K open gate, or, doing 8K, or doing, whatever other high resolution or 50 frames per second, I mean, I could be completely wrong here, but I just can't really see a use case for me personally where I'd need to take a long take and have that extra resolution. Because for me, the extra resolution is for the more stylized, sexy videos, and not for that, one bloke sitting on a stage talking about finance. So I don't really get their point there. So I guess my advice would be that if you are doing a lot of long takes, stick to 4K. I mean, it still looks great. It's still plenty enough resolution, and you can reserve your 6K and your 8K shooting modes for your more aesthetic, stylized sort of sequences, if you like.
And I think so in a second we'll get into kind of how to get unlimited recording / no overheating or best practices with these cameras. I think the last reference I want to touch point on, and this is early stage testing for me as well, just to preface, is I did take the S5 IIX and then the S1 IIe, and I had them both in similar conditions outside in direct sun, shooting 6K open gate, 24 frames a second. The S5 IIX settings was auto 2 and standard. Meanwhile, the S1 IIe settings was auto 1 and high, and the S1 IIe, to my surprise, overheated in 22 minutes. Meanwhile, the S5 IIX didn't overheat. It basically, the camera died after like an hour and 20 minutes or so. So I think there's definitely something that speaks about those older Lumix cameras. Like if you are a wedding filmmaker and you're like, yeah, I just need to dual record with 2 SD cards and I need to be in the sun, the S5 IIX is still a killer camera and still such a great camera for what that camera is capable of. But what you could also do is have an S5 IIX on sticks, and then your S1 II could be on sort of a gimbal, or you could be handhelding that, and you're providing shade with your body, and you're more likely not going to be overheating that camera if you're actually just kind of running around with it in your hands. Meanwhile, just being on a sticks on a tripod, be more likely to overheat. So I think slightly shifting topics, unless you have any thoughts on that you can share. How do you get unlimited heat recording or no overheating? What is the best practices you think?
So from my testing, the best practice is step 1, not to use a TF Express Type B card if you are doing longer takes. Step 2, I mean, in my testing, and again, this is all indoors, not outdoors, the difference between setting my fan from Auto 2 to high, and the reason why I tested it at Auto 2 and not Auto 1 is because I believe firmly in testing a camera with its out of the box settings, because you and I, Matt, we're massive nerds. You know, we eat, sleep and drink Lumix cameras, whereas, you know, the average user might not, you know that there's multiple fan settings to choose. So I was adamant to make sure that I tested Auto 2. So changing the fan setting for me didn't really have that much of an impact, not much as setting your thermal management, which is to high instead of standard. So I'd say high thermal management, that is number 1. Don't use CF Express cards and stick to SDs or SSDs, and also shoot in 4K. And then if you want to take it one step further, you know, for those who are really, really nervous about it, leave your SD card door open, your battery door open, and the screen off of the back of the camera. So just pull that screen out slightly. And then if you want to take it even one more step further, you could then power the camera, via an external power source, whether that be a approved dummy battery, you know, whether the Panasonic official one, or you know, to a VTAP or whatever, because effectively, you know, a battery is always going to heat up inside a camera when it's on, so that also mitigates the issue slightly. And those would really be the only tips that I have as it stands to sort of, you know, I guess give yourself the best leverage.
I think only a couple things that I would add to that, and I'm still doing testing. I have a lot of products that are coming in right now to like prevent overheating in the most extreme conditions. Those are things like doing thermal pads, pin the thermal pad, which is meant for computers, on like the back of the monitor or on the camera body itself, adding like a Ulanzi fan, obviously, like you already said, recording to an SSD, and then just generally speaking, try to avoid direct sunlight on the back of the camera. I feel like it's specifically like, if the sun's here and the camera's here, you're fine. But if you flip those and the sun's here and the camera's here and it's hitting the back of the camera, that's when you more or less run into more of those issues. So I kind of have one more last question for this episode. But before we do that, where can people check you out, Josh?
Where can they check me out? I'm on all the dating apps. I'm joking. I'm actually an engaged man. That was a total joke. Yeah, no, I'm actually an engaged man. Sorry, guys, off the market. But if you want to check me out in a professional sense, you can always just type in Josh Cameron on YouTube, and I should be the first one that comes up. Or you can check out, well, actually, I'm in the process of redoing my business website, but it's feedmecontent.com. So yeah, I reckon by September, the new site will be live, hopefully. So yeah, that's where you can find me in a non-romantic and professional way.
Do you read off teleprompters for your videos, yeah?
That's why I'm so different on these calls, because in my videos, I'm a lot more, you know,
there's like,
to the point.
Like, obviously, I know you in person as well, and we've hung out in person, and I think there's like a comedic side to Josh that a lot of people don't realize. But like, when, I think it was on your S1 II episode, you're like, oh, who the F is he? Dying. You're like, why is he on my camera?
Yeah, honestly, I'm really trying to strike the balance of letting my personality shine through on YouTube. But the issue is the sort of videos that I make are so spec heavy, and of
Right.
course, it's a lot of detail to remember and to sort of be reeling off in a quick time. So keeping that all locked up here is very hard to do. So to make sure that I don't
Super,
make
super hard.
issues, exactly. That's why I'm normally reading off a teleprompter. But maybe I should start doing live streams so people can see what the true JC is like.
There's a slight chance that I might do one tonight, TBD.
Oh, very
But
nice.
my last question for you, Josh, is going to be purchasing advice that you would give to people. And generally speaking, depending on different scenarios, what camera would you generally recommend from the new S1 line of models?
I mean, if I'm talking personally, I would opt for surprisingly, the most used camera of the three is the S1R2 for me. There's something about that sensor that's just chef's kiss. It looks really, really nice for both stills and video. But that being said, I think the S12 makes the most sense for me on a bit, from a business standpoint in terms of what it can and can't do. While my heart is saying the S1R2 in a way, I think my brain is telling me the S12. I've got a video coming out that actually compares the S52X and the S12E in a lot more sort of detail, if you like. So I'm not really going to say anything about those because I want to wait until that video comes out. And, there's been a lot of tests that I've been running on those two as well. But in terms of purchasing, if your budget doesn't stretch to the new S1 series cameras, or let's say it does, but you have no L-mount lenses, then right now here in the UK, the S52X is about £1,600. Which is an absolute steal for a camera that does ProRes internally, that has 6K open gate, that, basically has all of the bells and whistles that anyone could really ever need in this game. So I still genuinely put so much value on my S52X. I think it's a fantastic camera. You could always buy an S52X and get the new 24-60, for example. That could be a really cool package,
100% agree. I mean, last 2 years, professionally speaking, I've primarily only used the S52X and done so many TV commercials with it and done so many different social media spots with it and campaigns. That camera is definitely packs way above its weight in terms of features and affordability. But it's like you said, at the end of the day, it's not cheap. That 24-60 though lens is such a sick lens. But it's has so many bells and whistles on that camera. So if you can't afford the S12, or if you're all right, the S12 is having some issues and something hopefully down the line doesn't have those issues, or if you're figuring out what specific workflow are you doing. Are you primarily a wedding shooter only, or are you doing more commercial campaigns similar to myself and Josh that are shooting more, not as long takes and not long takes outside? And I think that's the main issue with these cameras is the long takes outside in uncontrollable environments dealing with the sun, which is just a beast of itself. But thanks, Josh, for hopping on this episode. Appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure, mate, genuinely.
If you guys are interested in seeing an episode I had with Caleb talking about the future of Lumix, you can check out that video right there. YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Until the next one, guys, peace.